He said I was too poor and too ugly to meet his fiancée. So I stayed quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just let them have their perfect wedding, while I made a few quiet moves of my own. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know, I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. I had always planned to surprise him. My Julian. My only child. I remember the first time I held him, his tiny body wrapped in blue, his little mouth already frowning. Even then he looked at the world like it owed him something. And I swore I'd give him everything I had. I never went to college. Never had the luxury. I worked the register at Green's Market for 32 years. But what most folks didn't know, what Julian never cared to ask, is that I read. I studied. Every night, after long shifts and aching feet, I sat at my kitchen table and taught myself things that no one thought I could understand. Compound interest. Diversification. Risk tolerance. I read the Wall Street Journal like it was scripture. I watched CNBC with a notebook in my lap. While others saw a grocery clerk, I was quietly building a portfolio. Apple in 2003. Netflix in 2005. Some healthcare ETFs by 2010. I never told Julian because he never asked. And I wasn't doing it for praise. So when he called me up, voice all light and buzzing, telling me he'd proposed to a woman named Marissa, my heart swelled. I had already started planning. My idea was to cover the wedding. Not to impress anyone, but because I wanted to gift him something meaningful. A way of saying, everything I did was for you. I even called my attorney Renee to begin the transfer. I had a number in mind, more than enough to cover any venue, dress, or cake his bride could want. I imagined the look on his face when he found out. My quiet way of showing love. Then came the second call. It was around 8:30 at night. I had just steeped a cup of chamomile and was watching an old documentary on railroad expansion. The phone rang. I smiled when I saw his name. "Hey baby," I said, warmth already in my voice. "Hey ma," he replied. But his voice was tight. Hesitant. I waited. "So, me and Marissa talked and we think it might be best if you just sit this one out." "Sit what out?" I asked. "The wedding. Just the ceremony and reception. You know, it's gonna be really upscale and a lot of Marissa's family are very traditional." I blinked, confused. "I don't understand. You don't want me there." He hesitated again. "It's not like that. We just want everything to go smoothly." I tried to laugh it off. "Julian baby, I already got my dress picked. And I got a little something planned too. You'll see." He cut me off. "No. Don't do that. Don't make this a thing." I felt my throat tighten. "Sweetheart, I was planning to help. I wanted to contribute. This is your big day." That's when his voice changed. The mask dropped. "Mom, look, don't take this the wrong way. But you'd embarrass me. The way you talk. The way you dress. You just look poor." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat there, phone still warm in my hand, staring into the steam rising from my tea. It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I had raised this boy. Worked double shifts so he could go to summer camps. Took out a payday loan once just to buy him a band uniform. Sewed patches onto his jeans so he wouldn't feel less than around the other kids. And now, at the moment I thought I'd finally see the fruit of all that labor, he told me I wasn't good enough to be seen. The next morning I woke up still thinking maybe he'd call. Maybe he'd say it was stress talking. But the call never came. So I made one of my own. I called Renee. "Cancel the transfer," I said. "You sure?" she asked, clearly surprised. "I'm sure." Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked to the garage, turned on the old space heater and pulled out the shoebox labeled watch list. Inside were all my notes, stock forecasts, price tracking, annotated printouts from the early 2000s. And beneath them the catalog Julian had circled a few years ago. The one where he pointed at a black Mercedes S-Class and said, "When I make real money, I'm buying that for myself. No help. Just me." I smiled for the first time in days. I didn't want revenge. That's not who I am. But I did want peace. And sometimes, peace comes when people finally see you for who you are, and realize they never bothered to look before. I met with Renee in person 2 days later. We talked about reallocating funds, and I mentioned I was interested in a few commercial real estate opportunities. Anything specific in mind? She asked. I took out the Langford estate brochure. I heard it's under restructuring. Renee raised her eyebrows. That's where the reception's being held. I nodded. Yes. I know. She didn't ask any more questions. Just smiled and opened her laptop. A week later the title was in my name. Just like the car. Just like the control. Julian hadn't invited me. But I never needed an invitation to walk into something I owned. I didn't tell a soul. Not Renee, not my neighbor Gloria, not even the mailman I sometimes shared jokes with at the front gate. The day the ownership transfer went through, I quietly poured myself a glass of water and sat on my back porch. The Langford estate was mine now. Well, technically it belonged to a shell company I controlled. I had Renee set it up years ago for tax purposes, long before Julian ever met Marissa. I'd always believed in keeping assets clean and names off paper where possible. Not to hide, just to move in peace. The Langford estate was a historic wedding venue on the edge of town, a sprawling Georgian-style estate with manicured gardens, oak-lined paths, and chandeliers that sparkled like falling stars. Julian once told me Marissa had dreamed of getting married there since she was a teenager. And now she would. On my property. It wasn't about hurting him. Truly it wasn't. I wasn't going to show up and shout, "Surprise, I'm rich." No. What I wanted was to stand in that building and feel something they never gave me. Presence. I didn't need their recognition. I just needed to see with my own eyes the life I was once willing to build for my son. One he didn't think I belonged in. I called the estate's coordinator and let them know I'd be present during the wedding day. Not for the ceremony, of course, but to check on the new hardwood installation in the East Parlor. She didn't ask questions. Just told me they'd reserve the owner's lounge for my convenience. Then I bought the car. It was petty maybe, but it felt right. The Mercedes S-Class had been Julian's dream since he was 23. I remember him showing me the photo once while I was folding his laundry. Top of the line, he said. One day I'll have this. No help from anyone. I had smiled and said, "You will." And I meant it. Even when he rolled his eyes. Now I owned it. Deep black. Silver trim. Custom leather. I paid in full at the dealership, and the salesman had the nerve to look shocked when I slid over the check. "This car is a statement, Miss Barron," he said. "Yes," I replied. "Let it speak." The week before the wedding, I watched from afar as Julian and Marissa posted excited updates. Venue walkthroughs. Tastings. Dress fittings. Everything filtered through curated photos and fancy captions. Not once did they mention me. Not even to pretend I'd be there in spirit. I wasn't even a ghost in their plans. Renee called the night before. "Still planning to go?" "Yes," I said, "but I won't interrupt." "You sure?" I took a breath. "I just want to be present. That's all." The morning of the reception I dressed in quiet elegance. A slate gray tailored suit, pearl earrings, soft leather shoes. Nothing flashy. Just clean. I brushed my hair back into a bun and looked in the mirror. "You look like money," I told my reflection. "Now act like peace." When I pulled into the estate it was like driving through memory. The trees shimmered in the late afternoon light. The valet gave me a little bow when he opened my car door. "Welcome, Ms. Barron. Owner's lounge has been prepped. The wedding party should be arriving soon." "Thank you," I said. "I'm just here to observe." I didn't go into the main ballroom. I sat in the owner's suite behind the glass wall, sipping lemon water and watching staff scurry like ants preparing everything just right. And then through the side window I saw Marissa. She looked radiant. Soft cream satin gown, delicate curls, diamond studs in her ears. She was instructing someone about flowers when her eyes flicked up toward me. She squinted, curious, not hostile. And then she smiled. I hadn't expected that. A few minutes later someone knocked gently on the door. It was Marissa. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, peeking in. "You must be the new owner. We were told someone might be on site today. I just wanted to say thank you. This place means everything to me." I rose slowly, extended my hand. "I'm Evelyn. Evelyn Barron." She tilted her head, puzzled. Then her face shifted just slightly. A flicker of realization. "Oh," she said. "Julian's mother?" "Yes." "Well, I'm glad you're here," she said. "And you look wonderful, by the way." That surprised me more than the smile. "Thank you," I replied. "You're a beautiful bride." She left, still smiling, and I sat back down. My chest felt strange, warm, complicated. Minutes later, Julian arrived. He didn't see me at first. He was laughing with groomsmen, strutting like a man who believed the world was finally clapping for him. And then he looked up. He froze. For a split second, I saw the little boy again, the one who ran to me after his first school fight, bleeding lip and trembling arms. Now he just stared. He walked up slowly, face unreadable. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly. I stood tall. "Come." My voice like velvet over steel. "Didn't you hear? I own the building." His mouth twitched. "Seriously?" I said nothing. Before he could respond, the estate manager stepped into the main hall with a microphone. "We'd like to take a moment to thank our new silent partner and venue owner, Ms. Evelyn Barron, for her generous support." Gasps spread like sparks. Heads turned. I didn't move. Julian looked around, humiliated. "You did this to make a point." "No," I said. "I did this because I could." I didn't stay long. Once the reception began, I walked through the garden, past the rows of string lights and champagne flutes, and slipped quietly out the front gate. As I drove away, the Mercedes gliding down the moonlit road, I felt something in me settle. He didn't see me coming. But now he'll never forget I was there. I didn't think about it again for a while. After the reception, I went home, slipped off my heels, and soaked my feet like I used to after long days at the store. The silence of my house wrapped around me like a soft blanket. No fanfare. No photographers. Just me, a bowl of warm water, and the hum of the old fridge in the kitchen. I didn't need to relive what happened. It was already etched in memory. The way Julian's mouth tightened. The shock in the guests' faces. The tremble in Marissa's smile when she finally realized who I was. But I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. Still, the air had shifted after that day. Word traveled. Family members who hadn't called in years suddenly remembered my number. Distant cousins started liking my photos on Facebook. One even commented, "Wow, Auntie, you've been low-key rich." I didn't reply. Julian, though, he didn't say a word. Not a thank you. Not an apology. Nothing. I wasn't surprised. Then, about 3 months later, I overheard something that made me pause. I was at the bank finalizing paperwork on a new investment property when I heard the woman behind the counter chatting with a client about a house for sale in Buckhead. A 4-bedroom with high windows and a finished basement. "There's a young couple bidding on it," she said. "Name's Barron, I think." I didn't say anything at the time. But later that evening, curiosity got the best of me. I pulled up the listing and saw it. White brick, black shutters, wraparound porch. Julian had good taste, I'll give him that. The asking price was steep, though. I doubted he and Marissa had the funds. I gave it a week. Then I made an offer. Full cash, no contingencies. I didn't go through my LLC this time. I used my full name. Evelyn Barron. It closed in 4 days. I wasn't doing it to block them. Honestly, I doubted they'd even realize what happened. People like Julian rarely check public records. They just get upset when things don't work out. I waited another week. Then I mailed out invitations. Soft white envelopes, gold trim, cursive font. Brunch and housewarming. Hosted by Evelyn Barron. Sunday at 11 a.m. Address included. Press. Casual chic. Guests. Limited to 10 no plus ones without RSVP. I sent one to Julian and Marissa. At first, I didn't expect them to come. Julian probably tore the envelope in two the second he saw my name. But Marissa? She always struck me as someone who'd peek under the surface if given the chance. Sure enough, Saturday night, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi Mrs. Barron, this is Marissa. Just confirming we'll be there tomorrow. Thank you for the invite." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, "Looking forward to seeing you." Sunday arrived warm and breezy. I wore a floral blouse, linen trousers, and a pair of gold earrings I bought from a street vendor in Savannah years ago. The house was already stocked. Fresh pastries, fruit, mimosas, and a pot of shrimp and grits that had taken all morning to perfect. Renee showed up first, always early. She brought me a tiny bonsai tree in a glass dish. I gave her the tour while we waited. The doorbell rang around noon. I opened it to find Marissa standing in a soft blue dress, hair curled neatly, heels in hand. Julian stood beside her, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd bitten his tongue the entire ride over. "Welcome," I said. Marissa smiled. "The house is beautiful." Julian said nothing, just glanced around like he'd been sucker punched. I let them in, gave them the same tour I gave Renee. I noticed the exact moment Julian realized where he was. His neck stiffened. His eyes lingered a little too long on the arched windows, the kitchen backsplash, the red oak floors. He knew this house. He'd walked through it with Marissa, dreamed about it, probably even argued about how they'd afford it. Marissa, to her credit, said nothing about the coincidence. Instead, she leaned into me during the tour. "You really have an eye for layout," she said. "I've had time to learn," I replied. When we reached the back patio, I gestured toward the garden. "I'm thinking of putting in raised beds," I said. "Tomatoes, herbs. Something to keep my hands busy." Marissa nodded. "That sounds wonderful." Julian finally spoke. "So what, you just bought this out of spite?" I turned to him slowly. The other guests had wandered off inside. "No," I said, keeping my voice even. "I bought it because I liked it. Same reason you wanted it, I assume." He folded his arms. "You really enjoy showing me up, huh?" "No," I said again, more softly this time. "I enjoy silence. And good light. And waking up without hearing the words, 'too ugly,' ringing in my ears." His mouth opened, then closed. "I invited you here because you're my son," I said. "Not because you earned it." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked back inside. Marissa lingered. She didn't follow him. He touched my arm. "I'm sorry," she said. I looked at her, really looked, and saw something real in her eyes. Not pity. Not fear. Just recognition. "You're not like him," I said. She shook her head. "I want to be better than him." I smiled faintly. "Then start by listening. That's all I ever needed." We walked inside together. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain who I was. I just was. That night after everyone left, I stood alone in the kitchen, wiping down the counter that had barely cooled from the warmth of brunch. The leftover grits were packed up, the champagne flutes rinsed and drying. But something still stirred in the air, some quiet shift I couldn't yet name. Julian hadn't said goodbye. He and Marissa left in a quiet storm of tension after dessert. I didn't press. Let him stew. Let him sit in the silence of all the things he refused to say. I'd spent years begging that boy to see me. I wasn't begging anymore. But I did notice Marissa's lingering glance as they walked out. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was thoughtfulness. Something in her eyes told me that she was starting to ask the questions Julian never had. 2 days later, she called me. I was clipping basil leaves on the back porch when the phone buzzed. I saw the number and answered with a calm breath. "Hello. Hi, Mrs. Barron, it's Marissa. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all. I'm just enjoying the sun." "I wanted to thank you for the invitation," she said. "Your home is incredible. And I'd love to learn more. About you. About how you built all this. If that's okay." That gave me pause. Most people wait until the funeral to pretend they want to know your story. "Marissa?" She was asking while I was still breathing. We agreed to meet for coffee that Friday. We sat at a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and an antique shop. I wore the same blouse I'd worn the day I signed the Langford contract. Simple, sharp, and forgettable. She came in with no makeup, no jewelry. Just a notebook and a pen. "Where do you want to start?" I asked. She looked me square in the eyes. "How did you learn all this? The stocks. The real estate. The discipline." I smiled. "I didn't learn it in school, that's for sure. I learned it in silence. While the world called me stupid. While my son rolled his eyes. I learned it one night at a time, after closing at the grocery store before sleep took me." She scribbled something down. I went on to tell her about dollar cost averaging, about choosing ETFs that track the S&P 500, about never chasing hype but always following patterns. I watched her nod, her hand moving fast, her questions growing deeper. It wasn't a casual curiosity. She was hungry. And for once I let myself speak freely, without shrinking, without explaining, without apology. We met again the following week. Then again. A rhythm began. We started talking about building a portfolio, managing debt, understanding compound growth. She asked if I'd consider mentoring her. I said yes. Julian didn't know. At least not yet. But he found out soon enough. I didn't mean for it to happen at dinner. Marissa invited me over one evening. Just the three of us, she said. I agreed reluctantly. It had been months since I'd sat at a table with my son. The air felt brittle as glass when I walked in. The food was lovely. Marissa had made a lemon pepper salmon and asparagus risotto. Julian poured wine but barely looked at me. Halfway through the meal, Marissa brought up our meetings. Your mom's been helping me understand financial planning, she said lightly. She's brilliant, Julian. I think I've learned more in 3 sessions than I did my entire time in business school. He stopped chewing. She's what? She's been mentoring me, Marissa said. We've been meeting every Friday. Julian set his fork down hard. I didn't know that was happening, he muttered. You didn't ask, I said quietly. He looked at me, then really looked. I saw something in his face I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Not anger. Not arrogance. But fear. What else have you been doing? He asked. I took a sip of water. What haven't I been doing? That's the better question. He laughed bitterly. This is what you wanted, huh? Make me look like a fool? No, I said, keeping my voice steady. That happened without my help. Marissa cut in gently. Julian, I asked for her time. Not the other way around. But he wasn't listening. He stood abruptly and left the table, muttering something under his breath. I stayed seated. Marissa looked after him and then back at me. I'm sorry. You don't have to be, I said. I'm not. Later that night, after I got home, I stood at the window and looked out at the moon over my front yard. My phone buzzed. A message from Renee. You still want me to update the documents? She asked. I thought about it for a long time. Then I replied, not yet. Let's see what happens next. Because even after all that, a part of me still wondered, could he change? Could my son learn to see? And if not, then I already had my answer. A week passed after that dinner with Julian and Marissa. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the magnolia trees in front of my house began to bloom again, thick with white petals. Spring was always my favorite season. It felt like forgiveness, slow, quiet, and inevitable whether you believed in it or not. Marissa still came every Friday. And each time I noticed her posture change just a little. Her questions got sharper, her confidence steadier. She'd bring her laptop and spreadsheets now, asking things like, how do I calculate return on equity across different assets? And can I roll over that Roth IRA from my old job? It made me proud to see her mind waking up. One Friday we were reviewing a real estate deal she was thinking about, a fixer-upper duplex on the east side, when she suddenly paused mid-sentence. Evelyn, she said, do you think Julian even realizes what he lost? I didn't answer right away. I sipped my lemon tea and stared out at the yard. I think, I said slowly, he's only just beginning to suspect. She nodded. He's been quiet lately. Not angry. Just quieter. Sometimes silence is louder than any scream. That Sunday I went out to the garden, gloves on, knees creaking, digging a new row for tomatoes. The dirt was soft from the morning rain, the kind that sticks under your nails no matter how careful you are. I just finished patting down the mulch when I looked up and saw Julian standing at the edge of my driveway. He looked like he didn't know how to start. He had one hand in his pocket and the other hanging like it didn't belong to him. I didn't move. I let him come to me. Need help? He asked, a little awkward. You know anything about tomatoes? I said without looking up. He chuckled nervously. No. But I know I should have come sooner. I pulled off my gloves and stood slowly. Well, I said, you're here now. That's something. We sat on the back steps. The air was thick with the smell of dirt and cut grass. Julian stared out at the fence for a long time before he spoke again. I didn't know about the wedding fund, he said. Marissa told me. You were really going to pay for it. I said. Every cent. Why? Because I thought it would be the last big thing I ever did for you. He looked down. His voice dropped. I was awful to you. Yes, I said simply. He flinched at the honesty, but he didn't run from it. I guess I thought you were stuck. You always looked so settled in the same life. Same house. Same old shoes. I didn't think that I could be more than what you saw, I finished for him. Yeah, he whispered. Exactly. The wind shifted. A bluebird darted across the yard, chasing something invisible. I used to think, he said, That if I just looked the part, had the right suit, the right wife, the right job, that it would make me a man. But I sat across from you during that brunch and all I saw was everything I've been pretending to be. Calm, powerful, unbothered. I'm not unbothered, I said gently. I just know how to carry what hurts. He nodded. There was a long silence between us. But this one wasn't cold. It was thoughtful, alive. Then he asked it. The will, he said. Am I still in it? I turned to face him. His eyes were wary but not greedy. I saw something else there. Fear maybe. Or hope. Maybe both. I haven't decided, I told him. Because inheritance is not a reward, Julian. Trust. It's legacy. And I can't give that to someone who only sees my value when it makes them look good. He swallowed hard. I don't want your money, he said. Not anymore. I don't want to be shut out of your life. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time in years I saw something soft return to his features. Something boyish. Something real. I'm not shutting you out, I said. But I am watching. I'm watching how you show up. Not just for me but for your wife. Your community. Yourself. He nodded. Then stood, dusted off his jeans and turned to leave. At the gate he paused. You know, he said, I used to think you were poor. And now? I asked. He gave a crooked smile. How I know you were just quiet. That night I lit a candle and opened my journal. Renee had been asking whether I wanted to change anything in my estate plans. I hadn't replied yet. I still didn't. Instead I wrote something on the last page. I was willing to give him everything. But now I will give only what's deserved. Not because I stopped loving him but because I finally started loving myself more. The flame flickered. And I knew whatever happened next would be on his terms, not mine. It's funny how silence can stretch and shift over time. The silence that once wrapped around me like loneliness began to feel like something else. Like clarity. Like power. Not the kind of power that needs to be announced or flaunted, but the kind that grows deep roots beneath your feet. I had become my own soil. My own sunlight. 3 months passed after Julian came to the garden. He didn't disappear again, but he didn't crowd me either. He called once a week, sometimes just to ask how my tomatoes were doing, sometimes to share something simple. A book he started, an article he read. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And for once he wasn't talking at me, he was listening. Marissa, on the other hand, kept showing up. Every Friday like sacred rhythm. He brought friends now. 2 young teachers from her old school. A cousin looking to escape credit card debt. A hairstylist who was tired of relying on Cash Apps and Venmo to survive. We filled my sunroom with notebooks, calculators and warm pastries. We called it Money Mornings, and it became the highlight of my week. One morning Marissa asked me, "Do you ever wish you had done all this earlier?" Said more. Show more. I thought about it. The question didn't sting, it just made me reflect. No, I said. Because back then I needed to learn who I was in silence. No. Now I get to be loud if I want to. But it's my choice. That Friday as we wrapped up, one of the women asked, "Evelyn, you ever think about starting something? Like a foundation or program?" The idea lingered. I'd never thought of myself as the face of anything. I was a woman who kept her receipts, balanced her spreadsheets, and bought her dream car with a check she didn't need to explain to anyone. But maybe it was time I shared more than just advice. That night I called Renee. "Let's draft something new," I said. "A living trust. With teeth. I want something that will outlive me, but only if it's rooted in the values I've lived by." He loved the idea. We spent a week crafting the Evelyn Barron Financial Education Fund. A program for women over 40 who wanted to reclaim their future, regardless of background, education, or what the world told them they could be. I put up the seed money myself. Quietly. I didn't need headlines. 2 weeks later I invited Julian and Marissa over for dinner. Nothing fancy. Just my roasted chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, and a caramel pie I'd been working on for weeks. He brought flowers this time. "You cooked all this yourself?" he asked, looking genuinely impressed. "I've done it before," I smiled. "You just weren't paying attention." Marissa laughed softly and Julian actually looked a little sheepish. Over dinner we talked like people, not like adversaries or strangers tied by blood. Julian told me about a conflict at work, how he'd been forced to reckon with how he talked to people under him. I listened. Not to correct but to witness. After pie, I showed them the trust documents. I'm setting up a foundation, I told them. It's already funded. Fully independent. And if I go tomorrow, it'll continue without me. Julian blinked. A foundation? For what? For women like me, who didn't get a head start, who learned the hard way. I want them to have somewhere to start that isn't behind everyone else. Marissa smiled so wide I thought she might cry. Julian sat quiet for a long time. Then he said, I don't deserve to be part of that. I looked at him. I haven't decided what you deserve yet, I said, calm and steady. But you're not out of the running. He nodded, not arguing, not pushing. After they left, I walked back through my house. The one I bought without a single person's permission. I passed the framed photo of Ronald, my late husband, and paused in front of it. You'd be proud, I said softly. Not just of the money, but of the peace. The next week I wrote a letter. Sealed it in an envelope. Labeled it, to be opened upon my passing. Inside I wrote, if you are reading this, it means my time has passed. My estate has been left with intention. Not to reward blood but to honor integrity. To those who loved me without needing to be impressed, you'll find that I loved you back and I left proof. To my son, if you are reading this with clear eyes and a full heart, then I hope what I built has helped you grow into a man your mother could admire. I placed it in my lockbox beside the deed to the house and the title to the car. And then I made myself a cup of tea, turned on my favorite jazz record, and sat in my sunroom as the last of the light disappeared behind the horizon. No audience. No applause. Just me. And the truth that I had lived a full life not in spite of being underestimated, but because I never needed permission to rise. Let them say what they want after I'm gone. They'll remember the car. They'll remember the venue. They'll remember the house. But what I hope they remember most is that I was never just somebody's mother. I was a woman who knew her worth. And once I let them see it, I never let them forget it.